We set sail on board Tigress, Ron Given's 38-foot catamaran, which was subsequently renamed in the Atlantic by Nigel Mansell, largely because he was inexperienced in the art of catamaran handling and sailing, which was a great shame. She was abandoned under full sail and just let go, and was one of the great shames of the yachting history of New Zealand. Anyhow, prior to that episode, we set sail across the Tamaki Strait. The jib is hoisted, a very easy boat to rig, and Ron took the helm and explained to us the finer points of catamaran sailing. And Sally tweaks up the jib and away we go. The hull's leaving no apparent wave pattern. There was no fuss, and one of the things I first noticed was the massive main sheet system that Ron used on Tigress. A hard chine type of hull, resembling greatly just a large paper tiger. The sails are very flat cut, as you can see. One of Ron's, the hallmarks of Ron's sail cutting. Underneath the trampoline, I dropped the camera down and took a photo looking forward. Not very successful. And looking after the twin hulls and the trampoline deck gives a large area for working the boat. Large flat area, which is very nice. Fingertip control, and Ron in his usual battered straw hat. I don't know how many years he had that hat, but it seemed to last forever. The wind comes up a little bit to about 12 knots, and Sally tweaks the sheets a little bit, and away we go. Just a faint hiss, and at around about 10 knots of boat speed, the centreboards, you could just feel a faint hum coming out of the centreboard. Look at the main sheet system. This gives a very evenly distributed weight load on the boom. Topsy took the helm, and she had no problem. Fingertip control, just a few ounces required for correcting the faint amount of weather helm. It was very faint, so it's beautifully balanced. Ron gives us some further instruction on the art of sailing in cat, and everybody relaxes. The wind comes up a couple more knots, so things are tweaked in a bit more. And then Ron prepared the spinnaker. Well, this is some spinnaker, I might add. 2,000 square feet of rag going up in the air was awe-inspiring, I can tell you. We bore away, went about and bore away, and Ron and Sally prepared to launch. The 538 passes on the opposite tack, or doesn't pass, but we met it on the opposite tack, and Ron prepares the spinnaker pole. And up she goes. And it bloody seemed to fill the sky. It was so big. I'd never been on a yacht with a spinnaker like that before. It was a masthead spinnaker, and the mast itself was only a slender spar, so we had to have a special backstay rigged from the masthead to take the strain. Topsy's still on the helm, and off we go. This spinnaker was just ginormous. After sailing downwind for some time, the wind started to come up a little, and Ron said, "Okay, I think the next step was to jibe." And a neat way of jibing Ron has. He has hello. There's a pair of eyes from the helm. Ron rigs up a second pole, and cat sailing is quite different to monohulls. So he rigs up 2 poles, leaves them both on, pulls the mainsail in the middle for running dead downwind, and you're virtually using the spinnaker alone, and the main's not doing anything, and she'll sail dead straight with no one touching the helm for hours and hours and hours. Ron's explaining the way he does it, and then we came across a very unusual Dutch design with lee boards. The centre boards are carried on the side, but I was intrigued by the bowsprit. Never seen a bowsprit like that before. I don't know whether it's what the reason is for that. I just don't know. Anyhow, they were enjoying the day, and we zipped across behind them at around about 8 or 9 knots of boat speed. The wind is around about 12 knots. And then Ron decided we would go onto a reach, so I had a look at the accommodation. It's quite comfortable, although the hulls aren't that large. It's quite comfortable down in there for a couple of people. Sally does a bit of trimming, and we ease the pole round to the forestay. The wind is now up a little to around 15 knots. And then it came up to 18 knots, and I thought, you know, things are going to get a bit lively here. We're going to be stacking out or something, but no. 2,000 square feet of sail up on a reach, and we're doing 15 to 17 knots of boat speed now. And I took some measurements underneath, and I reckon that the windward hull was lifting 6 inches. So that was, you'd hardly even notice it. It wasn't even a couple of degrees. It might have been 1 degree of boat heel. So I took the camera underneath and took a shot forward past the dolphin striker, and there's no wave pattern. She skims along rather than cuts through. It was an unusual feeling. So after doing about 17 knots was the maximum boat speed, we decided we'd come around hard on the wind and go back, and they prepared to drop the kite. A flick of the rope and down she comes, but one stage I thought Sally was going to get blown overboard. She just about, you know, if it got a big puff of wind then, she got an awful lot of material still coming down, miles of it. So she just about loses control, so she puts a foot on it at one stage here. There was bloody material all over the place. And talk about scientific packing down below. They opened the hatch and they literally stuffed the whole lot down the hatch. How it would never ever come up. You know, I had to laugh at that. There's no way would that spinnaker come up in the right manner later. It'd probably come up upside down if it was me. So up with the jib, and we came round onto a reach, tight reach. And the wind was getting up now. The wind was up around 18, 19 knots. And the Tigress was flying. It was just, and Topsy still steering with one finger, you know. Absolutely no problem at all. The only problem she had was hanging onto a hat in the wind. The Pakatara Express goes past with a huge wave pattern. And then in the distance we saw a very unusual yacht called Chloe's Ark. So we decided we'd go and have a look at her, so we ripped across the Tamaki Strait in a few minutes. The speed was incredible. And had a look at Chloe's Ark. So we really enjoyed our days, well, not days, hour and a half or 2 hours sailing around on Tigress. And what a great shame that Nigel Mansell did not know enough about the factors governing catamaran sailing, and she was lost, abandoned. Great shame.